The scent of pine and damp earth clung to everything in the northern territories, from the stone walls of the ancient castle to the heavy drapes that kept out the cold mountain air, to my daughter's golden hair as she pressed her small face against the corridor window, watching wolves run through the forest below. I could smell it even on my own skin. No matter how many times I scrubbed in the servants' quarters, the unmistakable scent of a place that didn't want us here lingered. "Mama, why do their eyes glow like that?" Emma whispered, her breath fogging the glass. She was only 6, with hair the color of summer wheat and eyes far too curious for her own good. People said she had my eyes, though. I often wished she'd inherited her father's ability to stay invisible, because they're different from us. "Sweetheart," I murmured, pulling her back from the window. My hands trembled slightly as I adjusted her worn blue dress, smoothing fabric that had been mended too many times. "We should get back to the kitchen. Mistress Kaya doesn't like when we wander." But Emma had already spotted something else, a door slightly ajar at the end of the hallway, spilling golden lamplight across the dark stone floor. Before I could stop her, she slipped from my grasp, darting toward it with the fearless curiosity that terrified me. "Emma, no!" I hissed, my voice barely above a whisper. We were servants here, human servants in a castle full of wolves who could snap us in half without a second thought. For 3 months we had lived in these cold northern mountains, taking whatever work we could find after fleeing the eastern provinces. 3 months of keeping our heads down, our voices soft, our presence as small as possible. My mother's words echoed in my mind. The last thing she had told me before she passed. "Where there is no path, make one with kindness. Where there is no hope, plant seeds of compassion. The strongest walls fall, not to force, but to a gentle hand that refuses to strike back." She had been a healer in a small village, beloved by everyone who knew her. I had inherited her fair hair and supposedly her gift for soothing others, though I never felt particularly gifted at anything except surviving. The locket around my neck. Her locket, simple silver, with a tiny pressed flower inside, felt heavy as I hurried after my daughter. It was all I had left from before my husband died in the territorial wars, before we became refugees, before I learned that humans without pack protection were worth less than nothing in a world ruled by ancient bloodlines and supernatural hierarchies. Emma had already pushed through the door. I caught it before it could swing shut. My heart hammered so hard I could hear it in my ears. The room beyond took my breath away. It was a gallery of sorts, walls lined with portraits stretching back what must have been centuries. Alphas, I realized, each one more imposing than the last. Dark oils captured men and women, with eyes that seemed to follow movement, with expressions of power that made me want to bow even to their painted forms. The room smelled of old wood leather and something else, something wild, untamed, that made the hair on my arms stand on end. "Emma, we can't be in here," I said, urgently reaching for her hand. "This is the Alpha King's private gallery." She was pointing at something. Her small finger stretched toward a portrait that hung slightly apart from the others. Not an alpha this time, but a woman. Young, maybe my age, with fair hair that caught the lamplight and eyes that held both sadness and strength. She wore a simple dress, nothing like the formal regalia of the other portraits, and around her neck. My hand flew to my own throat, to the locket resting there. The woman in the painting wore the same one. "She looks like you, Mama," Emma said, her voice full of wonder. "See? Same pretty hair, same necklace. Is that Grandma?" The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. It couldn't be. My mother had never left our village, had never traveled to the northern territories, but the resemblance was undeniable. Not just the locket, though, that alone was impossible. It had been in our family for generations. But something about the eyes, the shape of the face, the way the artist had captured a quality of determined gentleness that I saw in my own reflection. "Who are you?" The voice came from behind us, deep and cold as the mountain streams outside. "And why are you in my private gallery?" I spun around instinctively, pushing Emma behind me. The man who filled the doorway was exactly what I had expected and somehow worse. Tall enough that he had to duck slightly beneath the frame, with dark hair that fell to his shoulders and eyes that literally glowed with amber light in the dim room. He wore simple clothes, black and well-fitted, but power radiated from him like heat from a fire. This was the Alpha King himself, ruler of the Northern Territories, the wolf whose very name made humans cross themselves and lower their voices, Darius Vale. I had only seen him once before from a distance during the welcoming ceremony for new staff. He'd seemed more myth than man then, distant, untouchable. Now, just a few feet away, I could feel the weight of his presence pressing against me like a physical force. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to grab Emma and flee, but my legs wouldn't move. "I'm so sorry, Your Majesty," I managed. My voice came out steady despite the terror coursing through me. I dropped into the clumsy curtsy I'd practiced keeping Nia tucked behind my skirts. We didn't mean to intrude. My daughter was curious, and I should have watched her better. "It won't happen again." His eyes, those impossible amber eyes, moved from me to Nia, who'd peeked out from behind my dress with her characteristic fearlessness. For a long moment, he said nothing. He just stood there, radiating that terrible stillness that predators have before they strike. Then his gaze moved past us to the portrait on the wall. Something changed in his face. The coldness cracked just for a second, replaced by something I couldn't name, shock maybe, or recognition, or pain. His jaw tightened, and when he looked back at me, there was a new intensity in his stare that made my breath catch. "Where did you get that?" he asked quietly, nodding toward my neck. My hand went automatically to the locket. It was my mother's, and her mother's before that. "It's been in my family for—" "What was your mother's name?" The question came sharp as a blade. "Catherine," I whispered, confusion mixing with my fear. "Catherine Ashford. But she died 2 years ago in—" "Get out!" His voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried such command that I grabbed Nia's hand and started moving immediately. "Both of you." We made it 3 steps before Nia's small voice piped up, fearless in a way that both horrified and amazed me. "But Mr. Why is my mama's picture on your wall?" I froze. Every muscle in my body screamed at me to keep moving, to get my daughter away from the Alpha King, whose hands had begun to shake slightly at his sides. But I couldn't seem to make my feet work. Darius Vale stared at my daughter with an expression I'd never seen on anyone's face before. Like he was looking at a ghost, a memory, a question whose answer might destroy him. When he spoke again, his voice was rough, almost broken. "That's not your mother's picture." His eyes found mine, and in them I saw something that made my heart stop. Recognition, longing, and a grief so deep it seemed bottomless. "That's my mate," he said, softly. "My Luna. The woman who disappeared 26 years ago, 3 months pregnant with my heir." The world seemed to stop spinning. 26 years ago, 3 months pregnant. My mother had always been evasive about my father, about where she'd come from before she appeared in our village with a newborn daughter, and no past she was willing to discuss. I'd assumed there'd been shame in it, maybe an affair with a married man, maybe something worse. But this— "That's impossible," I breathed. But even as I said it, I was doing the math, seeing the pieces fall into place like a puzzle I'd never known existed. The locket, the resemblance, the way my mother had always warned me to stay away from the Northern Territories, to never let anyone with golden eyes look too closely at me, the way she'd made me promise on her deathbed to always wear the locket, to never tell anyone where we came from. Some secrets are kept, not because they're shameful, but because they're dangerous. She'd told me, her hand gripping mine with surprising strength. "Promise me you'll keep yours safe, Lyra. Promise me you'll never let them find you." Darius took a step forward, and I instinctively stepped back, pulling Nia with me. But he wasn't looking at me with predatory intent anymore. He was looking at me, the way a man looks at a miracle he doesn't quite believe in. "Your age," he said hoarsely. "Tell me your age." 26, I whispered. "I turned 26 last spring." The sound he made was barely human, something between a growl and a sob. His hand reached out trembling toward my face, then dropped. "Catherine," he breathed. She called herself Catherine. But her real name was Catherine Blackthorne. She was... His voice cracked. "She was everything, and they told me she was dead. After she disappeared, they found her clothes by the river blood on the stones. They told me she'd been taken by rogues, that neither she nor the child could have survived." Naya's hand squeezed mine hard. I could feel her looking up at me, could feel the question building in her, even as my own mind struggled to process what he was saying. "Your Majesty," I started, but he cut me off with a sharp gesture. "Darius," he said roughly, if she... He seemed unable to finish the sentence. His legendary composure completely shattered. "The locket. May I see it?" Every instinct told me to refuse to grab Nia and run as fast and far as we could. But there was something in his face, some desperate hope, that called to the compassionate part of me my mother had nurtured so carefully. With shaking hands, I unclasped the locket and held it out. He took it like it might disintegrate at his touch, opening it with reverent care. Inside, pressed between two pieces of glass, was a tiny purple flower, mountain wolf's bane my mother had called it, though she'd never told me why she kept it. Darius stared at it for a long moment, and when he looked up there were tears tracking down his face. "I gave this to her," he whispered. "The night I proposed, I told her that even this poisonous flower had its purpose, that even things the world feared could be beautiful." She laughed and said I was talking about myself. A broken sound escaped him. "She wore it every day. The weight of the implications crashed over me like waves, each one more impossible than the last. If what he was saying was true, if my mother had been his mate, his Luna, if she had been pregnant when she disappeared, then that meant... No." I shook my head. "No, that's not possible. My mother was human. I'm human. We can't be..." Your daughter," Darius interrupted, his eyes moving to Nia with a sudden fierce intensity. "How old is she?" 6, I said automatically, then realized what he was really asking. "But she's human too. Her father was human. There's nothing. Show me her birth certificate, her father's name." I felt the blood drain from my face. There was no birth certificate, not a real one. Nia's father, my David, had died 6 months before she was born. Killed in a border skirmish that claimed so many human lives, it barely made the news. When Nia was born, and I saw her golden hair and the way her eyes sometimes caught the light, in strange ways I told myself I was imagining things. I told myself she was just a beautiful, normal little girl. But there had been moments, times when she healed too quickly from scraped knees, when she knew things she shouldn't, when I caught her talking to animals like she expected them to talk back. Times when I felt my mother's locket grow warm against my skin and remembered warnings I was too young to understand. Darius was watching me, and I saw the moment he read the truth in my silence. His eyes widened, and he looked at Nia with such raw longing it made my chest ache. "How much does she know?" he asked quietly. "Nothing," I said firmly. "She knows nothing because there's nothing to know. We're servants here, Your Majesty, just trying to survive. Whatever you think..." He interrupted, his voice gaining strength. "I know. You're my daughter, Lyra. Catherine's daughter, which makes Nia." He looked at my child with something like awe. "Nia is my granddaughter, my heir's heir." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. If he was right, if any of this was real, then our simple existence in the shadows was over. And I'd learned enough about pack politics in 3 months to know that heirs were assets, tools, pawns in the game played by wolves who saw humans as prey. "We should go," I said, reaching for the locket. But Darius closed his hand around it and around mine. His touch was warm and gentle, despite his strength. "Please," he said, and the raw need in that single word made me pause. Don't run, not like she did. Let me, he swallowed hard. Let me explain. Let me tell you about your mother, about what happened, about why. A howl split the night outside, long and mournful. Darius's head snapped toward the window, his whole body going tense. When he looked back at us, urgency filled his eyes. Someone's coming, he said quickly. The council. They can't see you here. Can't know about this. Not yet. He pressed the locket back into my hand. Go back to your quarters. Say nothing to anyone. I'll send for you tomorrow when... But Nia had gone rigid beside me. Her small hand was crushing mine. When I looked down, her eyes had changed. They glowed with the same amber light as Darius's, bright and wild in the dim gallery. Mama, she whispered, her voice strange and distant. Mama, they're coming for us. The bad ones. They've been waiting for us to be found. And in that moment, as I watched my daughter's eyes glow with impossible light, as I felt the truth of my heritage settle over me like a shroud, I realized my mother's warnings had come too late. We'd been found, and nothing would ever be the same again. The servants' quarters smelled of Lysol and desperation. 30 women crammed into a space meant for half that number, sleeping on narrow cots with blankets too thin for the mountain cold. Nia and I shared the corner spot, the one nobody else wanted because it was closest to the drafty window, but I preferred it. At least here I could see the stars. For a moment, I could pretend we were somewhere else, somewhere safe. But sleep wouldn't come tonight. Nia had finally drifted off an hour ago, curled against my side, with her thumb in her mouth. A habit she had broken when she was 4, but one she returned to whenever she was frightened. Her eyes had stopped glowing the moment we left the gallery, fading back to their normal blue-green. She had clung to me the entire way back, silent, in a way that terrified me more than any tantrum could have. They're coming for us. The bad ones. Children didn't say things like that. 6-year-olds didn't predict danger with such certainty, didn't have eyes that glowed like wolves. But then again, if Darius was right, if my mother had truly been his mate, if I carried wolf blood despite being unable to shift, then Nia wasn't just a child. She was something else entirely, something the world wasn't ready for. I touched the locket at my throat, feeling its familiar shape. 26 years my mother had kept this secret. 26 years of looking over her shoulder, of moving whenever anyone asked too many questions, of teaching me to be invisible, unremarkable, forgettable. And I thought she was just being paranoid, a traumatized widow protecting her daughter from a cruel world. But she had been protecting me from something far more specific. Where there is no path, make one with kindness, she'd told me. Had she been kind when she ran? Had Darius been cruel? I couldn't reconcile the broken man I'd seen tonight with the monster my mother must have fled from. Unless she hadn't been fleeing from him at all, but from something or someone else. A soft knock at the door made me freeze. It was past midnight. No one knocked at the servants' quarters at this hour unless there was an emergency or a summons from Darius Vale. The voice was female, cultured, with an edge that suggested she wasn't used to waiting. The Alpha King requests your presence in his study. Immediately. Around me, the other women stirred, some sitting up to stare. Mistress Kaya, the head housekeeper who'd made it clear she considered Nia and me barely worth the trouble of employing, narrowed her eyes from her cot near the door. The king doesn't request servants at midnight, she said sharply. What did you do, girl? My mouth went dry. Say nothing to anyone, Darius had ordered, but refusing a direct summons would be worse than any rumor. I don't know, ma'am, I said quietly, carefully extracting myself from Nia's grip. My daughter made a small sound of protest but didn't wake. I'll go find out. I'll watch the child, Kaya said, her tone making it clear this was an imposition. But if you've brought trouble to this house, don't think your pretty face will save you from being tossed out. I nodded, not trusting my voice, and followed the woman who'd knocked. A wolf, I realized, noting the grace in her movements, the way her eyes reflected the lamplight. She was dressed in the formal attire of the king's personal guard, black leather, with barely concealed weapons. We walked through corridors I'd only cleaned, never traveled. The castle revealed itself in layers, working areas, where humans scrubbed, cooked, and did the invisible labor that kept the place running, then the formal spaces where wolves conducted their business. Finally, as we climbed a spiral staircase that seemed to go on forever, we reached the private quarters where only the highest-ranking pack members dwelled. The guard stopped before a heavy wooden door carved with wolves, in various poses, hunting, howling, protecting their young. She knocked twice, then opened it without waiting for a response. "The human." "Your Majesty," she said, her tone neutral but her eyes curious, as they flicked between Darius and me. "Thank you, Kaya. You may go." Darius stood beside a massive desk covered in papers and maps, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. He looked older than he had hours ago, wearier, as if this meeting had drained something essential from him. "Kaya. No one speaks of this on my authority." The guard bowed and left, closing the door behind her with a soft click that sounded terribly final. For a long moment, Darius and I just looked at each other. In the lamplight, I could see details I'd missed before: silver threading through his dark hair, the scars on his hands, the weight he carried in the set of his shoulders. This was a man who'd ruled for decades, who'd survived challenges and wars I couldn't imagine. And according to him, he was my father. The thought made something in my chest twist painfully. He finally spoke, gesturing to a chair near the fireplace. "Please, I know you must be frightened, but I give you my word, my sacred oath, that no harm will come to you or your daughter while you're under my protection." I sat because my legs were shaking, not because I trusted him. "Why did you summon me? You said tomorrow." I said, my voice trembling. "I couldn't wait." He moved to the other chair, sitting heavily. Up close, I could see the tension in him barely contained. All evening, I'd been going through old records, letters, anything that might reveal what happened 26 years ago. And then I found something. He pulled a folder from the desk behind him, opened it to reveal yellowed papers covered in elegant handwriting. "Letters," he said, "from your mother, hidden in places only she would have known to look." My breath caught. "Letters to whom? To you?" His voice was rough with emotion. "Written in the months before she disappeared. She never sent them, obviously, but she wrote them anyway, as if she knew." He stopped, swallowed hard. "As if she knew she wouldn't be there to tell you herself." He held out a page, and with trembling hands I took it. The handwriting was my mother's. I'd recognize it anywhere, though it was younger here, less careful. "My dearest daughter," it began, "if you're reading this, then I've failed to keep you safe, and for that, I am so very sorry. There are things you need to know, truths I've hidden, because knowledge itself can be a death sentence in a world ruled by wolves. Your father is Darius Vale, Alpha King of the Northern Territories. I loved him with a desperation that frightened me, and he loved me the same way, or so I believed. But love among wolves is complicated by politics, by ancient laws, by councils who see human mates as weakness rather than strength. When I discovered I was pregnant with you, I was the happiest I'd ever been. But that happiness lasted only 3 days. On the 4th day, I overheard a conversation I was never meant to hear. Council members discussing how to eliminate the human problem before it could produce an heir. Discussing how to make it look like an accident, a tragedy, a rogue attack that no one could have prevented. They were planning to kill us, my darling. You and me both. The letter continued, but my vision blurred with tears. I looked up at Darius, saw my own shock and horror reflected in his face. "I never knew," he said hoarsely. "I swear to you on everything sacred," he continued. "I never knew they were planning this." He stood abruptly, moved to the window, his hands clenched into fists. If I had known, if she had told me, I would have torn apart anyone who threatened her. The entire council if necessary, he said. But then he paused. She didn't trust you to protect her. I said quietly, the words hanging between us, like an accusation. She trusted herself more. She ran. He flinched, as if I had struck him. Yes. And I spent 26 years believing she was dead. That I'd failed her. That some rogue pack had taken everything that mattered from me. He turned back to me, and in his eyes I saw decades of grief. I searched for months, he added. I sent out hundreds of wolves, followed every lead, every rumor. We found her dress torn and bloody by the river, found signs of a struggle. The council told me to accept it, to move on, to take another mate and produce an heir the proper way. But you didn't. No, I said fiercely. I couldn't. The mate bond. It's not something humans understand. When you find the one person whose soul fits yours, losing them is like losing half of yourself. I felt her out there, somewhere, alive but unreachable, and I held on to that feeling even when everyone told me I was mad. I looked back at the letter, forced myself to keep reading. I'm going to disappear, little one. I'm going to make them think I'm dead. And then I'm going to find somewhere far from wolves, far from politics, far from the danger that being Darius's heir would bring you. I'm going to raise you human, safe, ordinary. Your father is a good man beneath the crown and the duty. But he's also the Alpha King, bound by laws older than nations, surrounded by wolves who would see you dead rather than acknowledge a half-human heir. I can't take that chance. I can't risk your life on the hope that love will be enough. If something happens to me, if you find yourself drawn back to the north, remember this. You are stronger than you know. Your father's blood runs in your veins, but so does mine. Human blood, stubborn and resilient, and capable of surviving anything. Don't let them make you ashamed of either half. I love you, my precious girl. I'm sorry I won't be there to tell you these things in person, but I need you to live, even if it means I never see you grown. The letter was signed simply, Mother. Beneath it was a pressed flower, another wolf's bane bloom, purple, delicate, and poisonous. She protected you, Darius said softly, the only way she knew how, by erasing herself, by becoming someone else, by making sure no one would ever connect Catherine Blackthorn Luna of the Northern Territories with Catherine Ashford Village Healer, with a mysterious past. And it worked, I whispered. For 26 years it worked. Until I was desperate enough to take work in the one place she'd warned me never to go. Why did you come here? He asked. Because we were starving. The words came out harder than I intended. Because after David died, his family blamed me for his death and drove us out. Because humans without pack protection are nothing in the border territories. Because winter was coming and Nia was getting sick. And I had no other choice. I met his eyes. I would have walked into a dragon's den if it meant feeding my daughter. Your granddaughter. Something shifted in his expression. Respect maybe, or recognition. You're more like Catherine than you know. She had that same fierce protectiveness, that same willingness to sacrifice anything for those she loved. He returned to his chair, leaned forward with his elbows on his knees. Tell me about Nia. Tell me everything. So I did. I told him about the pregnancy, how I'd grieved David while carrying new life. About the birth, how easy it had been compared to other women's stories. How Nia had come into the world with a cry that sounded almost like a howl. About the strange things I'd noticed. The quick healing. The way animals responded to her. The dream she sometimes described of running on 4 legs through a forest she'd never seen. And tonight, he asked quietly, when her eyes changed. That was the first time I admitted. At least the first time I couldn't deny what I was seeing. There had been moments before, flickers I told myself were tricks of the light. But tonight, I swallowed hard. Tonight, she knew something was wrong. She felt danger coming. How is that possible if she's never shifted, never been taught anything about pack bonds or wolf senses? Because blood knows blood, Darius said. Because she carries the alpha line. And that means instincts deeper than training, older than teaching. It means... He stopped. His expression went dark. It means she'll be in terrible danger once the council learns of her existence. Fear spiked through me. Then we'll leave. Tonight. We'll disappear just like my mother did. No. His voice carried such command that I froze. Running didn't save Catherine. It just delayed the inevitable. And now there are witnesses. Maya saw you leave the gallery. Saw you in the corridor. Others will have noticed my summons. By morning, rumors will be spreading through the castle like wildfire. The council will demand answers. Then what do? I was gripping the arms of the chair so hard my knuckles had gone white. If we can't run and we can't hide, we fight. He leaned forward, intensity burning in his amber eyes. But not with claws and teeth. With truth. With legitimacy. With the law the council thinks they can twist to serve their purposes. He reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away, and took my hand. His skin was warm. His grip gentle but unmistakably strong. I'm going to acknowledge you, Lyra, publicly, as my daughter, my heir. My lost Luna's gift to the pack, Darius said, his voice low but filled with intensity. I'm going to make it impossible for anyone to touch you, or Nia, without declaring war on me directly. They'll never accept it. I'm not afraid of them, I whispered. A human heir. They'll tear you apart politically. Let them try, he growled, his wolf flashing in his amber eyes, dangerous, protective. I've spent 26 years ruling alone, compromising, making decisions based on what the council thought was best for the pack. And where did it get me? A cold castle. No mate, no children, no future. They took that from me once. I won't let them take it from me again. He stood and pulled me up with him, his grip strong but tender. Tomorrow at noon, I'm calling an emergency pack assembly. Every wolf in the territory will be required to attend. And in front of all of them, I'm going to introduce you and Nia as my family. He cupped my face with surprising gentleness, his thumb brushing away a tear I hadn't realized had fallen. I know you're frightened. I know you have every reason not to trust me, not to trust any of this. But I'm asking you, begging you, to give me the chance your mother didn't. The chance to protect you both the way I should have protected her. I wanted to say no. Every survival instinct my mother had drilled into me screamed to refuse, to grab Nia and disappear into the night. But looking into Darius's eyes, seeing the desperate hope there, the love for a woman he'd lost and the daughter he'd never known, I felt my resolve cracking. And beneath that, deeper still, I felt something else, a pull, like a string tied around my heart, connecting me to this man, this place, this impossible truth. Blood calling to the blood my mother had written. Maybe she'd felt it too, this belonging she'd tried so hard to deny. What about Nia? I asked. What do we tell her the truth? He said simply, as if it were obvious. She deserves to know who she is, where she comes from, and she deserves to choose, when she's old enough, whether she wants to claim her heritage or walk away from it. She's 6 years old, I reminded him. I know, he replied, his voice softening, which is why we'll protect her childhood, keep her safe from politics schemes and everything ugly about pack life. But we can't hide what she is, Lyra. Not anymore. Tonight proved that. His gaze darkened. Her instincts are waking up. Soon they'll demand expression. A thought struck me cold and terrible. The council members who threatened my mother, are they still here? Still in power? Darius's expression went dark. 3 of them are. 2 died in various conflicts over the years. 1 stepped down due to age. But yes, 3 of the 5 who plotted against Celine still sit on my council, still advise me. still pretend they have the pack's best interest at heart. And you're going to announce me in front of them. Let them know exactly who I am, who Nia is. I pulled back, panic rising. That's not protection. That's painting targets on our backs. No, Darius gripped my shoulders, firmly forcing me to meet his eyes. It's taking away their greatest weapon, secrecy. As long as you're hidden, you can be eliminated quietly, made to disappear without consequences. But once the entire pack knows, once I've claimed you, publicly touching you becomes an act of treason. They won't risk open rebellion. Not after everything I've built here. You're betting our lives on that assumption. I said, my heart pounding in my chest. I'm betting our lives on my ability to protect my family. He corrected, his voice soft but firm. Something I should have done 26 years ago. His grip gentled. I failed your mother. I won't fail you. I won't fail Nia, even if it cost me the crown. Even if it cost me everything. You're more important. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with both promise and danger. In the firelight, with his hands on my shoulders and his eyes burning with determination, he looked every bit the alpha king of legends. Powerful, protective, willing to go to war for those under his care. But I'd learned long ago that legends and reality rarely matched. Still, what choice did I have? Run and spend the rest of our lives looking over our shoulders? Or stand beside this man who claimed to be my father and face whatever came with the backing of an alpha bloodline my mother had chosen to run, and it had cost her everything? Maybe it was time to try a different path. Okay, I whispered. I'll stay. I will. I swallowed hard. I'll face them together. But if anything happens to Nia, I couldn't finish the thought, but Darius's eyes narrowed in response. If they even look at her wrong, they won't get the chance. He pulled me into an embrace that shocked me with its warmth, with its genuine affection. I promise you, daughter, on my life, on my honor, on everything I am, they won't get the chance. I let myself lean into him for just a moment. Let myself imagine what it might have been like to grow up with a father who hugged like this, who protected like this. Then I pulled back, wiped my eyes, and straightened my spine. I should get back to Nia, I said. She'll wake up frightened if I'm not there. Of course. He walked me to the door, then paused. Lyra, your mother. Did she ever speak of me in the years before she died? I thought about the question, about the few times my mother had let her guard down enough to reveal glimpses of her past. She told me once that she loved someone so much it felt like drowning, I said quietly. That some loves are too big for the people carrying them, too dangerous, too all-consuming. I met his eyes. She said she'd had to choose between love and survival, and she chose survival, so that I could have a chance at both. Darius's eyes glistened. That sounds like her. Practical even in heartbreak. He touched my cheek again, a gesture so paternal it made my throat tight. Sleep if you can, he said softly. Tomorrow changes everything. I nodded and slipped out into the corridor, my mind spinning with everything that had happened. As I made my way back to the servants' quarters, I passed windows that looked out over the courtyard below. And there in the shadows between the buildings, I saw them. 4 figures in council robes, standing in a tight circle, their heads bent in conversation. Even from this distance, I could feel their malevolence. I could sense the plots being woven in the dark. Nia had been right. The bad ones were coming, and tomorrow we'd face them in the full light of day. The great hall smelled of pine smoke and tension. I stood behind a heavy curtain with Nia pressed against my side. Her small hand crushed mine as we listened to the assembly gather beyond. Hundreds of wolves filled the ancient space. Their voices were a low rumble of curiosity and confusion, their scents mixing into something primal that made my human nose wrinkle. And Nia's eyes flashed amber for just a second before fading back to blue-green. Mama, she whispered, her other hand pressed to her stomach. My tummy feels funny. She'd woken that morning with questions I'd answered as truthfully as I could. That the king believed he was her grandfather. That we had wolf blood, even though we looked human. That today everything would change. She listened with that unnerving seriousness children sometimes have, then asked if this meant she could finally pet the big wolves she'd seen in the forest. The innocence of it nearly broke me. I know, sweetheart. You're just nervous. It's okay to be scared. I'm not scared, she said. And the certainty in her voice unnervingly reminded me of Darius. I'm excited. We get to be somebody now, right? Not just the kitchen people. Before I could answer, Darius appeared through a side door, dressed in formal regalia that transformed him from the grieving man I'd spoken with last night into something legendary. Black leather and silver wolf emblems. A ceremonial cloak that swept the floor. And on his head, a crown of twisted silver that caught the light like captured moonbeams. He looked every inch the Alpha King, but when his eyes found mine, they softened with something achingly human. Ready? He asked quietly. No, I would never be ready. But I nodded anyway. He knelt before Nia, bringing himself to her level. Hello, little one. Do you know who I am? You're the king, Nia said solemnly, and Mama says you might be my grandpa. A smile ghosted across his severe features. I am, and I'm very happy to meet you. Properly, Nia. What you're about to see might be confusing, maybe even frightening. A lot of people are going to stare, and some might say unkind things. But I need you to be brave. Can you do that? I'm always brave, Nia declared, puffing out her small chest. Mama says I get it from my Papa David. He was a soldier. Something flickered in Darius's expression. Grief perhaps for the human man who'd raised his granddaughter without knowing what she truly was. Then you have two fathers to make proud, David who loved you in life, and me who will protect you with everything I have. He stood offering his hand to Nia. Walk with me. She took it without hesitation, her small fingers disappearing into his large palm. The trust in that gesture made my throat tighten. Darius led us through the curtain and onto the raised platform at the front of the great hall. The moment we appeared, the rumble of conversation died as if someone had cut all sound from the world. Hundreds of pairs of eyes locked onto us. Amber gold green eyes glowing with that unmistakable wolf light. I felt exposed, vulnerable, like prey stepping into a den of predators. But Darius's hand found my shoulder steady and warm, anchoring me. My people, he began, his voice carrying through the hall with natural authority. Thank you for gathering on such short notice. What I'm about to reveal will shock many of you, anger some, and give hope to others. But above all, it is truth, and truth is the foundation upon which we must build our future. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. In the front row, I could see the council members, 5 elderly wolves in crimson robes, their faces masks of careful neutrality that didn't quite hide their unease. 3 of them, Darius had said. 3 of them had plotted my mother's murder. 26 years ago, I lost my mate, Darius continued, and a ripple of surprise went through the crowd. He never spoke of Celine publicly. Everyone knew she had been human, and that made her a target for those who believed humans weakened wolf bloodlines. When she disappeared, I was told she'd been killed by rogues. I mourned her. I searched for her. And eventually, I accepted that she was gone. His hand tightened on my shoulder. I was wrong. Celine wasn't killed. She ran. Fled from a threat so terrible she felt she had no choice but to fake her own death and disappear. And she did so while carrying my child. The hall erupted. Gasps, shouts, denials. The sound crashed over us like a wave. I instinctively pulled Nia closer, but she seemed fascinated rather than frightened, her eyes tracking the crowd with unusual focus. Silence. Darius's voice carried such command that every wolf in the room immediately stopped speaking, heads bowing slightly in automatic submission to their alpha. This is Lyra Blackwood, daughter of Celine Ashcroft, my daughter, my heir. And this," he placed his other hand on Nia's head, "is Nia, my granddaughter. Both carry my bloodline. Both are under my protection. Both will be respected as members of the royal family, or you will answer to me personally." One of the council members stood an ancient wolf with silver hair and cold eyes. "Your Majesty," he said with all due respect, "these are extraordinary claims that require extraordinary proof. Any human could walk in here with a convenient story." "Are you calling me a liar, Councillor Zane?" Darius's voice dropped to something dangerous. "Are you suggesting I don't recognize my own mate's locket? Her handwriting. The daughter who carries her face." He reached into his jacket and pulled out the letters he'd shown me, holding them high. I have Celine's own words written in her hand, explaining exactly why she fled and from whom. Zane Wilder went pale. "Your Majesty, I merely suggest that you suggest nothing." Darius cut him off, his voice low but commanding. "You and your fellow councillors had 26 years to explain to me why my mate felt so threatened she chose exile over staying with me. Why she believed her child, our child, would be safer growing up in poverty and hiding than in this castle under my protection." His eyes swept over the council and I saw 3 of them flinch. Perhaps now would be a good time to offer that explanation. The silence that followed was deafening. Zane sat slowly, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. Beside him, a female councillor with sharp features, I thought I'd heard her called, leaned forward. "The girl may be Celine's daughter," she said carefully. "But how do we know she's yours, a human woman?" Alone and desperate, careful Darius growled, his voice thick with warning. "You're speaking of my mate and questioning my heir's legitimacy. Both are dangerous paths to walk. I'm merely stating what others are thinking," Vera continued, though her voice wavered slightly. "For the pack's stability, we must be certain. A simple blood test, would I volunteer?" Mine, came a voice from the crowd. It was Kaya the guard who'd escorted me the previous night. She stepped forward, bowing to Darius. "Your Majesty, I've served as your personal guard for 15 years. I know your scent as well as my own, and I swear on my honor the child carries it." Faint filtered through human blood, but unmistakable. "She is of your line." Others began stepping forward in support. "I can confirm," it said, "a young male wolf. My senses are among the sharpest in the pack. The girl is alpha-blooded, as can I added an elderly female wolf. I remember Luna Celine's scent. The woman carries it mixed with the king's. They are who he says they are." One by one, wolves stood in support. Not all, but enough that the tide began to turn. I watched in amazement as strangers vouched for us, as the pack instinctively recognized what the council had tried to deny. Darius's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. "The pack has spoken. Blood recognizes blood, as it always has. Lyra and Nia are mine. They are ours. And anyone who threatens them, threatens me." He paused, letting that sink in. "As of today, Lyra holds the title of Crown Princess. Nia will be trained in our ways when she's old enough to choose them. Until then, they will live in the royal wing, under constant guard, with every privilege and protection my position affords." "Your Majesty, please." Zane tried again, standing. "Think of the precedent this sets. A human heir. The other packs will see it as weakness. They'll use it to challenge your authority." "Let them try," Darius said flatly. "I've held this territory for 40 years through strength and wisdom. Any pack that wants to challenge me over my choice to protect my family is welcome to do so. We'll see how that ends for them." Nia tugged on my hand. When I looked down, she was staring at Zane with an intensity that seemed far too old for her small face. "Mama," she whispered, "that one smells wrong, like when milk goes bad." My blood went cold. Around us, several wolves had stiffened noses, flaring as if they'd caught the same scent. Darius's eyes narrowed. "Nia," he said carefully, "what else do you smell?" My daughter tilted her head, her eyes unfocused in that way that meant she was processing something beyond normal senses. "Fear," she said simply. And then she frowned. And, Mama, what's the word for when you want to hurt someone but pretend you don't, Malice? I whispered. That. Nia pointed at Zane, then at two other council members, the ones Darius had identified as conspirators. They all smell like that, like bad milk and wanting to hurt us. The hall went deadly silent. Every wolf in the room was now staring at the three council members who sat frozen in their seats. I realized what had just happened. A 6-year-old child with no training, no experience, had just identified threats using abilities she shouldn't even have. Abilities that came from being an alpha's granddaughter. Darius smiled, and it wasn't kind. Out of the mouths of children, he said softly, "Counselor Zane, Counselor Vera, Counselor Jorik. I believe we need to have a private conversation about events 26 years past. The rest of you are dismissed." Darius's voice rang through the hall with finality. "Welcome my daughter and granddaughter as you would any members of the royal family." The three counselors stood as if pulled by invisible strings, their faces ashen. They knew, I realized. They knew they'd been caught exposed by a child's innocent observation, and there was no way to deny it without making things worse. As the assembly began to disperse, wolves approached us, some curious, some respectful, some openly warm. An elderly female wolf touched Nia's hair gently. "Welcome home, little one," she said with a soft smile. "Your grandmother would be so proud." Nia beamed up at her, then looked up at Darius. "Grandpa, can I see the wolves in the forest now, please?" He laughed, a genuine sound of joy that I suspected he hadn't made in years. "Soon, little wolf, very soon." But as I watched the three counselors being escorted out by guards, saw the fear in their eyes and the tension in Darius's shoulders, I knew the real battle was just beginning. We'd been acknowledged, we'd been welcomed, but we'd also just declared war on the very people who tried to destroy us once before. And this time I thought they won't underestimate us. The royal wing smelled different from the servants' quarters, beeswax candles, old books, and the scent of luxury I'd never imagined touching, let alone inhabiting. Our new rooms were larger than the entire space 30 women had shared below. There were windows that looked out over mountains painted gold by the afternoon sun, and furniture so fine I was afraid to sit on it. Nia had no such reservations. She'd claimed the smaller bedroom immediately, delighting in the 4-poster bed with its forest green canopy and the window seat, perfect for watching the wolves run below. Now she was curled up there with a book Darius had given her, a children's story about a brave little wolf who saved her pack. While I stood at my own window, watching the sun sink toward the horizon and trying to process everything that had happened, I realized 3 days had passed since the assembly. 3 days of learning to navigate a world I'd been taught to fear, of meeting pack members who ranged from genuinely welcoming to coldly suspicious, of sleeping in a bed so soft I kept waking up disoriented. 3 days of Darius treating me with careful kindness, as if I might bolt at any moment, which truthfully I still considered several times a day. The council had been suspiciously quiet, too quiet. A knock at the door made me turn. Kaya entered without waiting for permission. Something I was learning was normal for the royal guard, who took their protective duties seriously enough to be borderline intrusive. "Princess Lyra," she said, the title still sounding absurd to my ears. "The king requests your presence in the North Tower alone." My stomach tightened. "What about Nia?" "I'll stay with her," Kaya said, her expression softening slightly as she glanced at my daughter. "She'll be safe, you have my word." I wanted to refuse, wanted to keep Nia in my sight at all times. But I was learning that being part of the royal family meant trusting the pack, meant accepting protection rather than facing everything alone. It went against every survival instinct my mother had taught me, but my mother's way had ended with her dying alone. Her secrets buried with her. "I'll be back soon, sweetheart," I called to Nia. She looked up from her book and waved. "Okay, Mama." "Kaya, do you want to hear about the brave wolf?" As I left, I could hear my daughter's animated voice beginning the story, and Kaya's surprisingly gentle responses. Perhaps we really were safe here. Perhaps. The North Tower was accessed through a narrow spiral staircase that seemed to climb forever. By the time I reached the top, my human lungs were burning, and my legs ached. Darius waited in a circular room lined with windows. Maps spread across a central table. He looked up as I entered, his expression grave. "Thank you for coming. I wanted to speak privately," he said, away from watching eyes and listening ears. He gestured to the maps. "These are the territories surrounding ours. 5 packs each with their own alpha, their own ambitions. News of your existence has already spread. 3 have sent congratulations. 2 have sent concerns." I moved closer, studying the maps. What kind of concerns? The kind that question whether a half-human heir weakens my position, whether it makes us vulnerable to challenge. His jaw tightened. Alpha Garrett of the Eastern Ridges has been particularly vocal. He's always coveted our lands, always looked for weakness to exploit. "Then maybe you should reconsider this," I said quietly. "Naya and I can disappear again. We're used to it. You don't have to sacrifice your kingdom for—" "Don't!" The word came sharp. "Don't suggest that. Not ever." He moved around the table, his eyes intense. "I've spent 26 years, living half a life making compromises, putting the pack before everything else. And what did it gain me? A cold castle, advisors who plot behind my back, and the ghost of a woman I failed to protect." He took my hands, his grip warm and firm. "You and Nia are not a sacrifice. You're the reason I remember why I became Alpha in the first place. To protect those who couldn't protect themselves. I'm not helpless," I said, pulling back slightly. "I've survived this long without—" "I know you're not helpless." His voice softened. "Your mother raised a survivor. But there's a difference between surviving alone and thriving with support. Let me give you what I couldn't give her. Safety. Family. A chance to live without constantly looking over your shoulder." The vulnerability in his voice cracked something in my chest. This powerful Alpha King, feared by so many, was asking permission to be my father. And despite everything, the danger, the politics, the impossibility of it all, I found myself wanting to say yes. "The council," I said instead. "The 3 who threatened my mother, what happened to them?" Darius's expression darkened. "They're confined to their estates, stripped of their council positions, pending a formal investigation. I have wolves going through 26 years of records looking for evidence of their conspiracy. But they're clever, Lyra. They've hidden their tracks well. And if you can't prove it," I asked, understanding, "then I'll deal with them another way." The threat in his voice was unmistakable. "They threatened my mate, plotted against my child. Pack law is clear about such betrayals. But you need proof," I said. "You need to follow your own laws, or you're no better than they are." He looked at me with something like pride. "You understand politics better than most wolves born to it." "I understand survival," I corrected. "And sometimes surviving means following rules even when you don't want to." I moved to one of the windows, watching the forest below. My mother used to say that true strength wasn't about being the most powerful. It was about knowing when to fight and when to find another path. I paused. She was wise. Darius joined me at the window. I wish I'd listened to her more when she was here. She tried to tell me the council was dangerous, that some of them saw her as a threat. But I was arrogant, so certain I could protect her through sheer force of will. His voice turned bitter. I was wrong. "You were in love," I said softly. "Love makes us believe we're more powerful than we are." He glanced at me. "You speak from experience, David. The name still stung even after 6 years. He was gentle, kind, everything good, in a world that seemed determined to be cruel. When he died, I thought I'd die too. But then Nia was born, and suddenly I had to be strong enough for both of us. I touched the locket at my throat. My mother's words kept me going, about making paths with kindness, about planting seeds of compassion. David had believed in those things too. He would be proud of you, Darius said, of the mother you've become, the woman who walked into danger to protect her child. Would he, I wondered? Or would he be horrified that his daughter has wolf blood, that everything he thought he knew about us was a lie? He loved Nia, didn't he? Knowing he loved her, it means he loved all of her, even the parts he didn't understand. Darius's hand found my shoulder again, that gesture that was becoming familiar, just as I'm learning to love the daughter I never knew. Human blood, wolf blood, all of it. The words made my throat tighten. I'd spent so long being invisible, being nothing, that having someone claim me so fiercely felt almost painful. A howl split the evening air, long, urgent, alarming. Darius's head snapped toward the sound. His whole body went tense. That's the perimeter alarm, he said, already moving toward the stairs. Something's breached the territory. Fear shot through me. Nia Kaya won't let anything happen to her, he said, but he was already running, and I was right behind him, my human legs struggling to keep up with his supernatural speed. We burst into my chambers, only to find Kaya standing in front of Nia's door, her body positioned protectively, her eyes glowing with that unmistakable golden light. Nia stood behind her, calm despite the tension, her small hand resting gently on Kaya's back, as if offering comfort. "Report," Darius commanded. "Rogues," Kaya said tersely. "A dozen at least. Coordinated attack on the eastern wall. They're not trying to breach. They're trying to draw attention away from something else. A distraction." I breathed, understanding flooding through me. They want us focused on the attack while... Darius finished grimly, his voice steely. He pulled out a small device and spoke into it rapidly. "Lock down the royal wing. No one in or out without my direct authorization. Triple the guard on Princess Lyra and Nia. And find me Counselor Zane. I want to know exactly where he is and what he's doing." Nia stepped around Kaya, her eyes meeting Darius's. "Grandpa," she asked, her voice clear and direct. "The bad milk people are trying to hurt us, aren't they?" The simplicity of her observation, the way she cut through all the politics and intrigue to the bare truth, made Darius smile despite the danger. "Yes, little wolf. But they won't succeed. Your mama and I won't let them," good Nia said firmly. Then, to everyone's surprise, she walked up to me and wrapped her arms around my waist. "Don't be scared, Mama. We're stronger together. Grandma told me." My blood went cold. "What did you say, Grandma?" Nia repeated, looking up at me with her wise eyes. "She comes sometimes in my dreams. She has pretty hair like yours, and she smells like flowers. She says we're safe now, that we found our pack." Darius staggered slightly, as if he'd been struck. "Catherine," he whispered, barely audible. "You've seen Catherine in dreams. She says she's sorry she had to leave, but she's happy we found you." Nia said as though it were perfectly normal. "She says the poison flower has its purpose, and sometimes love means letting go so others can hold on tighter." The words hit me like a physical blow. That was my mother, speaking in metaphors and wisdom, teaching even from beyond death. And she was telling us to trust this, to hold on to this family we'd found, to let Darius protect us the way he'd wanted to protect her. "We stay," I said suddenly, the decision crystallizing inside me. "Whatever's coming, whatever the council tries, we face it here, together." Darius's eyes met mine, gratitude and fierce determination mixing in the amber depths of his gaze. Together, he agreed. Outside, more howls rose, wolves responding to the threat, the pack mobilizing to protect its own. And for the first time in my life, those howls didn't sound like danger. They sounded like family. The attack lasted 3 hours. From our protected chambers, I could hear the sounds of battle snarls, howls, the clash of bodies. The primal fury of wolves defending their territory. Nia stayed pressed against my side, no longer asking questions, her small body trembling despite her earlier bravery. Even Kaya looked tense, her hand never leaving the weapon at her belt, as she monitored communications through her earpiece. When Darius finally returned, there was blood on his clothes. Not his own, he assured me quickly, and exhaustion was etched into every line of his face. But there was also satisfaction in his eyes. "We captured 5 of the rogues alive," he said, accepting the water Kaya handed him. "The rest fled, or were killed, and they talked. Rogues always do when faced with pack justice." Darius's eyes found mine, dark with fury. "They were hired," he continued, his voice laced with cold anger. "Paid to create a distraction while someone attempted to reach the royal wing." My heart stuttered. "Attempted," I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "We caught him in the eastern corridor, one of Zane's personal guards, carrying a silver blade coated in wolfsbane poison." Darius's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "Enough to kill a wolf. More than enough to kill a human or a half-blood child." Nia made a small sound of fear, and I pulled her closer, feeling the rage burn through my terror. They had tried to murder my daughter. This wasn't political maneuvering anymore. This was a direct attempt on a child's life. "Where is he now?" I asked quietly. "In the dungeons, along with Zane, Alara, and Jorik." We found correspondence in Zane's chambers, messages arranging tonight's attack. Darius knelt before Nia, his expression softening, despite the fury simmering beneath his calm exterior. "You're safe, little wolf. I promise. They'll never get close to you again." "I know," Nia said with surprising confidence, her small hand reaching out to touch his face. "Grandma said you'd protect us. She said you always wanted to. You just didn't know how to find us." Darius's eyes filled with unshed tears, and he pulled Nia into a fierce embrace. Over her head, his gaze met mine. In that look, I saw everything. Grief for what he'd lost, gratitude for what he'd found, and a love so deep, so powerful it transcended blood, time, and all the years we'd spent apart. When he finally released Nia, he stood and took my hand. "There will be a trial. Tomorrow. The council," he said grimly. "What's left of it. And the entire pack will serve as witnesses and jury. Pack law demands it. And if they're found guilty," I asked, already knowing the answer, "exile or death. Their choice." His jaw tightened. "But they won't be given the opportunity to threaten my family again. That much I can promise." The trial took place in the Great Hall at dawn, with every wolf in the territory gathered to witness pack justice. The 3 former council members stood in chains, silver that burned their wrists, keeping them weak and unable to shift. The guard who'd carried the poisoned blade stood beside them, his head bowed in shame. Darius presided from his throne, formal, terrifying in his authority. But he insisted I sit beside him, in the chair that had remained empty for 26 years, the Luna's throne. Nia sat on my lap, her presence a living reminder of what these wolves had tried to destroy. The evidence was presented methodically, the letters arranging the attack, the payments to rogues, the guard's testimony about his orders to kill, the human woman, and her spawn. But it was the oldest evidence that sealed their fate, a journal found hidden in Zane's estate dated 26 years ago, detailing the plot to eliminate Celine and her unborn child. "We did what was necessary," Zane snarled when given the chance to speak. "A human, Luna, weakens the pack, makes us vulnerable to challenge. And now you've compounded that mistake by acknowledging a half-blood heir and a child with barely any wolf blood at all." He looked at me with pure hatred. "You should have stayed hidden like your mother. At least she had the sense to know she didn't belong here." "My mother," I said, standing slowly, my voice steady and clear. Had the sense to know that a pack led by men like you wasn't worth staying for. But she also had the courage to keep me alive despite your attempts to kill us. And now her granddaughter, your future alpha, sits here as proof that you failed. I descended the steps, Naya's hand in mine, walking toward the chained wolves with my head high. Every survival instinct screamed at me to keep my distance, but I didn't. I stood my ground. ChatGPT Danai. But I had learned something in the past few days. Sometimes courage meant standing in full view of your enemies and refusing to flinch. You see weakness when you look at us. I continued, my voice steady, carrying through the silent hall. A human woman and a child. Easy targets, but you're wrong. My mother survived 26 years in hiding, raised me alone, kept us alive through poverty, prejudice, and constant danger. I've buried my husband, fled from those who wanted us dead, and walked into the one place I was taught to fear because my daughter needed me to be strong. I lifted Nia's hand. Nia is 6 years old and can already sense threats you couldn't hide, can already access instincts you spent lifetimes developing. We're not weak, we're survivors, and that makes us more dangerous than any pureblood who's never had to fight for their place in the world. The hall erupted in howls, approval, support, the pack acknowledging truth when they heard it. Even some who'd seemed suspicious before were nodding, seeing us differently now. Darius stood, his voice cutting through the noise. The evidence is clear. The confession is recorded. By pack law, I could execute you all where you stand. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. But my mate, my Celine, believed in mercy even for those who didn't deserve it. She believed the strongest choice wasn't always the most violent one. So I offer you this. Exile. You have until sunset to be gone from my territories. If any of you are ever seen here again, the sentence will be death. No trial, no mercy, just justice. You're weak. Weak, Alara spat. Just like your human whore made you weak. This pack deserves better than. She never finished the sentence. Darius moved faster than my human eyes could track, suddenly, inches from her face. His eyes blazed with fury. Speak of her again, he said softly, dangerously. An exile becomes execution. Test me. Alara's courage failed. She lowered her eyes in submission, and the fight drained from all three conspirators. They were led away in chains to be escorted to the border, cast out forever. The guard, younger and visibly terrified, was given a lesser sentence, servitude to the pack for 10 years, his every action to be monitored. As the hall cleared, Kaya approached with several other wolves I'd come to recognize over the past few days. There was Cade, the young male who'd vouched for our bloodline at the assembly. Leora, an elderly female who'd been my mother's friend years ago and wept when she learned Celine's daughter had returned. And Jackson, Darius's second-in-command, whose gruff exterior hid a surprisingly gentle soul. Princess Kaya said formally, then smiled. The pack is planning a celebration tonight. A proper welcome for our Luna's daughter and the future heir. There will be food, music, stories. Nia would love it. Can I, Mama Nia? Nia asked excitedly. Can we go to the wolf party? I looked at Darius, who smiled with such warmth that it transformed his entire face. Say yes, he urged. Let them celebrate. Let them see their royal family, happy and together. It's been too long since these halls held joy, so that night I wore a dress that had belonged to my mother. Found preserved in storage, a deep blue, as midnight, with silver embroidery that caught the light like stars. Nia wore a smaller version, her golden hair crowned with flowers that the pack children had gathered. And Darius wore no crown at all, just simple clothes and a smile that made him look years younger. The celebration spilled from the great hall into the courtyards, with bonfires lighting the night as both human and wolf forms mingled freely. Children, both human and wolf-blooded, played together while their parents shared food and stories. Musicians played instruments I'd never seen, creating melodies that seemed to call to something wild in my blood. Nia was passed from wolf to wolf, each one treating her with reverence and affection, teaching her words in the old language, showing her how to howl properly. Her laughter rang through the night, pure and joyful, the sound of a child who finally felt safe enough to simply be a child. "She's happy," Darius said, appearing at my side with 2 glasses of something that smelled like honey and fire. I haven't heard laughter like that in this castle since before Celine left. I accepted the glass, sipping carefully. The liquid was sweet and warming, spreading through me like courage. "Thank you," I said quietly, my voice almost a whisper. "For all of this, for fighting for us, for giving Nia a chance to know where she comes from. Thank you." He countered, his voice soft but steady. "For trusting me, for staying when every instinct probably told you to run, for forgiving me a second chance to be the father I should have been to you all along." We stood in comfortable silence, watching Nia dance with the other children. Her movements unconsciously mimicked the grace of the young wolves around her. She would grow up here, I realized. She would learn to navigate both worlds, human and wolf, vulnerability and strength, my mother's compassionate wisdom, and Darius's protective fierceness. She would be extraordinary. Lyra, Darius's voice broke through my thoughts. "There's something I want to show you. Will you come with me?" He led me away from the celebration through corridors I had walked through dozens of times. But they felt different now in this quiet darkness. We climbed to the gallery where this all began, where Nia's innocent question had shattered decades of secrets. My mother's portrait still hung there, but it wasn't alone anymore. Beside it now hung another painting, freshly commissioned, Darius explained, from an artist who worked from my descriptions and memories. It showed a man and a woman standing together, his hand on her shoulder, her hand covering his. Behind them, a forest stretched endlessly, and in the foreground, 2 small figures, one with golden hair, one slightly larger, played among wolf's bane flowers. "Us," I breathed. "All of us. Together. A family," Darius said softly. "The one we were always meant to be. Just 26 years delayed." He turned to me, his expression serious. "I can't give you back the years you lost, the childhood you should have had, the father who should have been there. But I can give you every day forward, every protection, every resource, every ounce of love I have left to give, if you'll accept it." I looked at the painting, at the family we were becoming, at the future it promised. My mother had made her choice out of fear and love. She had sacrificed everything to keep me safe, but she had also left me that locket, those letters, breadcrumbs that would lead me home when the time was right. Maybe this was what she had wanted all along. Not for us to hide forever, but for us to come back strong enough to stand against those who had driven her away. "I accept," I whispered, "not just for me, but for Nia, for the pack, for the mother who couldn't stay but never stopped loving us both." I met Darius's eyes, my heart full, for the father who spent 26 years mourning what he'd lost and never gave up hope of finding us again. He pulled me into an embrace, and I let myself sink into it. Let myself feel the safety of pack, of family, of belonging. Outside, wolves howled in celebration, their voices rising to meet the stars. And in my mind, I swear I heard another voice join them, my mother's voice, finally at peace. Finally able to rest, knowing her daughter and granddaughter had found their way home. The wolfsbane flower had served its purpose. Poison transformed into medicine. Danger into safety. Loss into love. We were exactly where we belonged.